Did you know that making plans can release endorphins? As long as you're excited for the plans. Hi, I'm Ian, and this is the January planning video where I talk about my bookish plans. So this is not a deep dive into what I'm going to be reading in January, but instead I'm just going to talk about what videos that I'm going to be creating. But because this is always bookish content, of course I'm going to gab a little bit about some books that I have recently read. First up, I recently finished Say Nothing by Radden Keefe. This is about the troubles or the ongoing conflict in Northern Ireland between the IRA and Unionists. It centers around the disappearance of a woman. She had 10 children and they were essentially left without any parents after that. But that's just the beginning, and instead we follow a few important figures during this time period, mainly between the 1970s to the late 2000s. This was pretty good. It was a bit drier than I thought it was going to be, but it is still an amazing account of how complicated that situation was, and it also humanized a lot of people that I assume have been vilified or even put on a pedestal depending on which side you fall. Then I read Beartown by Fredrik Backman. This is my third Fredrik Backman. I have read A Man Called Olga, which was 5-star read for me. The hype is actually worth it. And then I read Anxious People, and that was not my favorite. I can go into that at a later date. So I was a little nervous about liking this. It takes about half the book to get to the incident that starts to tear this community apart, but once you get there, it's absolutely worth it. You've already spent so much time with these characters and really the community as a character. You know how in romance books, especially, New York City can be a character within itself? That's kind of what this is, except it's not the city or Beartown that is the character. It is the actual community, the people, the characters that make up that community. And that's what makes this book so special. I'm really interested to see where this goes because it is the first book in a trilogy. I'm a little more than halfway through The Employees by Olga Ravn. This is translated from the Danish by Martin Aitken. To be honest, I have no idea what's going on in this book. I'm usually reading it before bed, and it seems to really do the job. It's only 125 pages. And it is not a fast read. The margins are 1,000,000% on my side, and it is not a fast read. Frankly, this book is asking me to clock in. And I'm sorry, but I do not feel like being on duty while reading this book. You're gonna have to put me on a pip. I am not gonna do any work while reading this book. For those of you that don't know what this book is about, it's hard to describe. So it's like statements. Each page is like a different statement, quote unquote. And it's sci-fi. It takes place on a spaceship, and they've discovered this planet called New Discovery. There are objects on this planet that are extremely enticing and really grab the attention to the point of obsession of the people and the humanoids that live on this space station or spaceship, whatever it is. It's all very vague. And I know that I'm supposed to tie these statements and these sentiments and this very disjointed narrative to capitalism and being a worker in an office. And I can't. I refuse. I just can't. This isn't a bad book. Actually, I don't even know if I can say if it's a bad book or not. Like, I'm not clocking in. There are no character names in this. I can't tell if some statements are being given by different people or if they're like multiple statements by one character and multiple statements by another. Like, I have no idea. All the statements are like numbered. I'm on statement 080 right now. And December as a whole, I read 7 books. That will soon be 8. I plan on finishing this before the end of this month / this year. I had 12 books on my TBR. I read 7 of them. I DNF'd 3. And I kind of like threw 1 book in, and I'll go over that in my December wrap up. I only had about 2 books that I thought were really good that I read this month, which is a bit of a bummer, but that's also kind of how my reading goes. So I don't know if I should necessarily be sad about that. I'm at a point where I just want to be done with The Employees so that I can actually read the shit that I want to read in January. I'm so excited for it because the theme in January is tying up loose ends. So I'm going to be reading books from trilogies that I haven't finished. I'm going to be reading books that I started years ago and haven't finished, or maybe a few months ago haven't finished. I am just like really pumped for this because there are some books in here that I began reading for pleasure, but got sidelined because I got excited about other books on other TBRs. Anyway, the point is that this is going to really feel like wrapping something up, and I'm really excited to talk about all that stuff in my January TBR video. However, I will let everyone know in this video that we have decided on our next book club pick for the It's Only a Book Club book pick. The book club is on Fable, so if you want to join, you absolutely should. We read one horror novel a month, some long, some short, some popular, some not, and this month we voted on The Woods All Black by Lee Mandello. Lee Mandello is a trans writer and a critic. This is a really short book. The only options we were going to have were going to be books that we could immediately devour at the beginning of the year, really like get some momentum, start off reading goals with something that is really, really achievable, right? So The Woods All Black is about a trans man who is placed as a community nurse in a small town in Appalachia. And in this small town, there's a local congregation that has just focused this religious ire on a young tomboy. But apparently, the hills surrounding this small town in Appalachia have a mind of their own. I'm excited to see what themes come up with this, even though this doesn't fit as a loose end in January. It's part of the book club. So as a sneak peek to my January TBR, here are a few books that I will be reading and talking about further in my January TBR. First up, The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemison. This is the third book in the Broken Earth trilogy. I have not finished this series yet, so this is the loose end that I'm tying up here. This is sci-fi, fantasy, post-apocalyptic, dystopian. It's kind of all of these subgenres meshed together. I gave the fifth season 4 stars, and I gave The Obelisk Gate, the second book, 3.75 stars. In the first book, we find out that this is about a mother who is searching for her missing child on this continent called the Stillness. And in the Stillness, they're periodically plagued by massive earthquakes that completely destroy civilization and even change weather patterns, hence the fifth season. In this world, there are people called orogenes, and these people have genetically adapted to be able to control seismic activity. I like this because it feels post-apocalyptic, love that. There's a little bit of magical school stuff going on in this series too, which I also love. There's also a good versus evil and a chosen one vibe about this. So a lot of tropes, a lot of subgenres all rolled into one. I have thoroughly loved these characters and loved their non-binariness and gender queerness. I am just obsessed with this series and am excited to finish it. Then I'm going to read Tar Baby by Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison is my favorite author. I've read Beloved 3 times, gave that 5 stars. I read The Bluest Eye, gave that 5 stars. And I read Sula, which I gave 4.25 stars. Tar Baby is about a fashion model with a white patron, a white boyfriend, and a coat made out of 90 perfect sealskins. This fashion model ends up having an affair with a black fugitive. So you can imagine the themes on race that are going to occur here as a black woman existing in a white world with this sort of secret black life, I'm assuming. I am just so excited. No one knows the English language like Toni Morrison does. So I have actually not started this book, but it fits the tying up loose ends because it's the only Toni Morrison book that I own that I have not read. I own 4, I've read 3, this is the 4th. Let's tie this up. And the only non-book club book that I have on my TBR that does not fit this tying up loose ends theme is King. This is like a king of a book. Oh my God. By Jonathan Eig. I don't know how to pronounce that. This did win the Pulitzer Prize in 2023, I think it was. This is very obviously a biography about MLK And it's got that really classic, like, there are pictures in the middle of the book. You know how nonfiction books, they used to do that. That used to be like the only way you would find pictures in a nonfiction book. Also some deckled edges here, which I'm actually not a fan of, but I know some people like it. I'm looking forward to reading this. Obviously, MLKJR's birthday is in January. We celebrate it in January. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice to actually read some material about this person that Americans sort of center their entire understanding of racial equality around in a way that is hopefully more humane and complex and truthful than what I learned in school. This is definitely falling into what I will talk about later in a bit around what I'm going to be doing for my nonfiction reads in January. So if you want to see what other books I'm going to be reading in January, please check out my January TBR. You can click subscribe if you want, but is that what we're doing anymore? Is that really what we're doing anymore? Click subscribe. All right, now on to the actual January plans. So, Ian, put up the calendar. Don't forget. First up, I'm going to be doing my December wrap-up. I imagine I'll be talking about 7 or 8 books, and then I DNF'd 3 that were on my TBR, but I also picked up quite a few audiobooks just out of boredom. It was kind of a slumpy month, so I was picking up a bunch of stuff just to test it out, and I think I'll talk about those as DNFs as well, in which case I probably DNF'd probably 7 books. I'm a picky little bastard. Then I'm going to be talking about my top 10 books of 2024, which I already have decided. Even when I finish The Employees, I am not worried about my top 10 having to change because of that. Some miraculous thing would have to happen. And since I got so good at DNFing, the top 10 was so easy to put together. Okay, so also when you're looking at this, these videos are not going to come out on these dates. This is more like it's going to come out on the week that I have it there, because I am still trying to figure out how on earth to edit everything in a timely fashion. Then I'm going to have my worst books of 2024, which is always fun to talk about. And again, because I got so good at DNFing, this was also really easy to do. I didn't end up reading a lot of books that I hated, because I just stopped reading anything that I hated. Then I'm going to give 1-sentence reviews on every single book I read in 2024. So just 1 sentence. I won't blab like I normally do, because there are 71 books. And then, oh my God, you guys, we are like halfway through the decade. So I'm going to do my favorite books that I've read this decade so far. I'm going to follow that up with 2024 bookish superlatives. So this is going to be like outside the top 10, outside, the worst books that I read. This is going to be like, best nonfiction or most beautiful cover or whatever it is I decide to do. This will be a bit more fun. Then I'm going to be doing a bit of a fantasy challenge, I guess. So here's the premise. I thought that I really loved fantasy as a genre, but it turns out I just love fantasy movies and not fantasy books. That hurt to come to that realization, but I know that's not true, because I genuinely enjoy urban or contemporary fantasy that takes place kind of in the real world, but there are maybe magical elements and hard magic systems. So anyway, I'm going to talk about that this month in a video. I'm going to talk about what my plans are. I'm going to reveal every single book that I'm going to read. I have 12 books, 1 per month, each one from a different fantasy subgenre. And the goal also is to finish the one that I have chosen for January by the time that I film that video, so that I can basically give a review, which is what I intend to do on a monthly basis, about where I'm at with these different fantasy subgenres, and if the book that I've read has piqued my interest enough to keep me reading in that particular subgenre. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We're gonna have to play this by ear. Then I'm gonna have a whole separate video to talk about my sort of intentions for reading nonfiction in 2025. I have found that I particularly love memoirs, and that's honestly no surprise. I've loved them since I was young. I don't know why I had avoided them. I think I just avoided nonfiction in general after college. Probably pretty obvious reasons. However, I'm wanting to get back in because I love reading them and I read for enjoyment. So I'm going to talk about what I have planned for 2025, because I do like to read at least 1 nonfiction book per month. I'm going to follow that up with February plans. So basically this video, but for February. And then we're going to talk about the February TBR, which I actually have all figured out. It's all wrapped up. It's all ready to go. And you can bet that it's not just going to be romance. And that is that. Let me know what you are looking forward to in 2025. Do you have any intentions? Do you have any goals? Do you have any plans? What about January in general? There's just a lot to think about in January. So let me know in the comments below. I want to thank you for hanging out. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, click the bell. I don't know, whatever you got fingers for. I will see you next time, and happy reading.